Hi everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IS in English. My name is Bhanwar Singh, MX India 115th course and qualified civil services in 2012. And I welcome you onto the platform. So let's say if you're live, please type in the message and let me know that you're watching this session live along with me onto the platform. So let's see who is live right now here with us. Avi, good morning. Who else is here? Please type in the message and let me know that you're watching this session live along with me. All right. So we'll be moving ahead and we'll be doing the complete the Hindu analysis. All right, that is what we'll be doing currently. So over here, when it comes to today's topics or the themes that we have for discussion, so these are the important themes that we'll be discussing in today's session. The first one is about the overhaul of the exam governance and the NTA restructuring as well. Then the second one that we'll be talking about is the delimitation debate and the union state federal dynamics. Then we'll be talking about the AI facial recognition technology as compared to Article 21 privacy rights as well, because this relates to the Puttaswamy judgment. Then we'll be talking about the monsoon hydrological stress and the Krishna Basin irrigation crisis as well. Then the structural barriers in the female workforce participation rate. There is a complete editorial. So this is the editorial that we'll be discussing. All right, then we'll be talking about the maritime risk mitigation protocol for the Indian seafarers as well, also in the editorial column. Then the impact of the US Section 301 forced labor tariffs on trade and the executive rationalization of the election duty under Article 324. But this is not just the complete topics. We'll be discussing 2 or 3 more topics that are again important, where we'll be doing the complete analysis of those important topics related to our prelims and the mains as well. Now over here, these are the quotes that you can use for your mains examination. The first one is by Lord Hayward, and it says, this is one of my favorite quote, that is the justice, it must not only be done, but must also be seen to be done. And then we have the second quote that is over here, that is by Diogenes, and it is the foundation of every state is the education of its youth. Now you can use these quotes while you are framing the question for your GS paper 2, that is governance and polity, or when it comes to the Diogenes quote, you can use this when you are writing the answer related to the issue that we are seeing right now, the protest of the students that is ongoing. All right, then we have the third quote also, that is good governance is not merely the execution of the public policy, it is the unwavering commitment to justice, transparency and the institutional correction or the protection of the human dignity. All right, so these are the 3 important quotes that you can use while you are framing the answer to your mains examination. Now, before moving to the first news that we have for today, let me tell you that we have the batch which is starting from the 27th of July, and you can enroll into the batch, GS Foundation batch, on the platform of StudyIQ by using the code BRS Live. Now, over here, we have the first news. Basically, this deals with what we are witnessing in the country, and that is the protest of the students that is ongoing, the CJP or the Cockroach Janata Party, which is adamant that there will be the resignation of the Union Minister of Education, Dharmendra Pradhan. That is its demand that they have said time and again. But at the same time, this is about the governance crisis that we are talking about. This is about the education crisis as well, and even the examination governance also. And when it comes to the complete news, you will see that there are the 3 or the 4 of the news which are basically connected to this, where we have the Union Cabinet which has approved the stringent amendments to the Public Examinations Prevention of Unfair Means Act 2024, where it has hiked the present term to 5 to 10 years. And also, when it comes to the fine had been raised up to 10 crore rupees as well. All right, at the same time, there is another news where basically the NTA, that is the National Testing Agency, it had terminated the services of 47 of the officials and also initiated the criminal probes amidst the allegation of the paper leak in the NEET UG examination. Also, there is a third news where the Delhi police crime branch. It has created a dedicated STF, or the Special Task Force, that will be headed by the DCP, that will prosecute the offences under the 2024 Public Examination Prevention of Unfair Means Act 2024. And also, there is another news where the Supreme Court, it has asked the centre to file a comprehensive roadmap regarding the data safety, cyber security and transition to the computer-based testing as well. So these are the 4 important news that you can club into, and this actually relates to the institutional overhaul of the complete examination system that we are talking about. Apex, good morning, and good morning Shinobi as well. Now this is quite important because ultimately there had been certain proposals, or there had been the cabinet which has proposed the stringent measures when it comes to the 2024 Act. Now what are the proposals that had been, they had been approved by the cabinet? So over here right now, when it comes to the 2024 Act, so if there is the imprisonment, so imprisonment is the minimum period that has been prescribed is 3 years, but now that had been raised to 5 years. Alright, at the same time, when it comes to the maximum imprisonment, so in the original act for the individual malpractices, it was 5 years, that was the maximum imprisonment, but now that had been raised to 10 years. Alright, at the same time, the maximum fine for the organized crime earlier was 1 crore rupees, which had been increased to 10 crore rupees, and the trial timeline, there was no specified statutory timeline, but now there will be combined 5 months of the fast track resolution, where what will happen is that when the FIR is filed, so there will be 2 months of the time period that will be given for the complete investigation, and after the investigation for the complete trial, there will be the 3 months time period that will be given for the conclusion of the trial. So this is how we have the 5 months of the fast track resolution that had been proposed in the 2024 Act. Alright, at the same time, the judicial mechanism when it comes to the Public Examination Act, the base act that is there. So the standard sessions court trials was there, and it is still there because ultimately these are the proposed amendments and they have not yet been passed by the parliament. They had been proposed by the cabinet right now. Alright, but ultimately the proposal is that there will be a dedicated fast track court that will be with a statutory backing as per the amendment that will be made. So these are the proposed amendments which had been made by the cabinet after the, we have seen that there had been announcement by the Prime Minister. He came online on the Instagram and then he have posted a video about, taking the stringent measures when it comes to the paper leakages. And that is the proposals that we can see that the government is proposing right now relating to the examination crisis that we are seeing at the moment. Now, this is quite important because ultimately there are systemic vulnerabilities that we can see in the complete examination system. Whether it is at the stage of the paper setting, it is at the stage of the paper printing, or even at the time of the logistics as well, where the papers, they are transferred from one place to the another. So there are the systemic vulnerabilities that actually leads to the paper leak and even the malpractices as well. Now, actually, when it comes to the paper leak, that actually leads to the erosion of the meritocracy, because ultimately this is disadvantageous to the students who actually, they study day and night, and then ultimately because of the paper leakage, it actually, is advantageous only to those students who actually are able to purchase the papers. Alright, there is the youth discontent ultimately that rises, and there are the protests that we are seeing right now. And the measure is that there had been legislative amendments to the 2024 Act, and also there is the fast track judicial redressal that had been proposed by the centre that we can see related to the complete systemic vulnerability that we are talking about. Now, this is quite important because ultimately there has to be the complete overhaul of the complete national testing agency. It is not just about, proposing the amendments to the 2024 Act, but the government, it must actually move towards a complete overhaul of the complete examination system, where first thing is that there must be the cyber security, where actually the encrypted question paper distribution must be done. There must be a psychometric unit that must be responsible for the item bank development or the question bank development as well. There should be a vigilance and the STF which should move forward for the anti-racket operations, and there must be fast-track courts which should lead down to the time-bound trials, and that is what is required when it comes to the complete examination governance. Now, because this is a major issue that we are talking about, you will find a question related to this in the mains examination. I don't know what kind of question will be there, but this is just expectation that statutory penal measures alone cannot restore the credibility in the public examinations without systemic, administrative and technological overhauls. So over here, discuss this in the light of the recent reforms in the NTA. That could be a question that you can find in your mains examination. Now over here, you must move forward. You should define the examination governance crisis with the data as well, where it has actually impacted nearly about 22 lakh of the aspirants which were there in the NEET examination. All right, and also you can cite the Public Examination Act of 2024 as well. Then you can move towards the body. Always remember when you are writing the answers, so you must cover the 3 or the 4 dimensions that should be there. The first one over here is the legal and the statutory dimension, where you can talk about the fast-track courts, you can talk about the non-bailable provisions and the extended prison terms which had been proposed by the cabinet. Also over here, the second dimension that you can touch is the technological or the operational, where there must be transition to the computer-based test. There should be end-to-end encryption of the question paper, and also the psychometric item banks that must be prepared. And then there must be the institutional dimension that you must touch, where you should talk about the implementation of the Radhakrishnan Committee recommendations and the dedicated STF oversight. And then you can move towards the conclusion, that is the way forward, which should emphasize that there must be public trust. That should be the core tenet of the good governance. And here you can rely on the spirit of the Article 315, which have led to the formation of the public service commissions that we have, whether it is UPSC or the state public service commissions. All right, coming to the next, the set of the theme that we have for today. It is basically where we have the protesters. They cover the faces and the videography, which had been said by the Centre to the High Court that this is an acceptable practice. Now, this is about the fundamental rights and the surveillance state as well, because over here we have seen that the Delhi police, it has deployed the AI-enabled FRT, that is facial recognition technology, mobile command vans and even the drones to scan the protesters at the Jantar Mantar against the criminal databases. Also over here, the Delhi High Court, it has heard the PILs which have challenged the FRT surveillance, where ultimately the centre have argued that the videography in the public places, it actually serves the legitimate state interest and lack the expectations of the privacy as well. Now, this is also very important because there is another news that you will find in our today's The Hindu, where actually the Supreme Court, it has issued an interim order where it has prohibited the unauthorized extraction, editing, clipping and even the monetization of the code live streaming videos under the model rules for the live streaming. So again, these are the various news that could be clubbed together, and you can see that this is about the right to privacy and even about the surveillance state that we can see. Now over here, this is quite important because ultimately this is where we can see that there is a public demonstration that is being held. Now, in this public demonstration or the public, the protest that is going on at the Jantar Mantar, there had been deployment of the AI FRT vans, and ultimately that will lead to chilling effect on the dissent, because the people, they will not protest. They will be, they will be under the fear that their data could be used by the police for the verification. And there it comes to the important judgment that is, we had the Puttaswamy judgment which has laid down the proportionality test where it comes to the infringement of the fundamental rights by the state. Also, ultimately this had been challenged in the High Court, and there is a mandatory statutory safeguards that must be laid down by the High Court when it comes to the surveillance by the, by the state. Now, this is very important because ultimately this connects to the Puttaswamy judgment, which had actually laid down that the right to privacy is a fundamental right that is under the right to life and personal liberty. Now, this is quite important because there are the threefold surveillance tests that had been laid down by that Puttaswamy judgment, where the first was the legality, where it should be backed by the explicit statute or the law. The second thing is about the necessity, where it should be aimed at legitimate state goal. And the third one is about the proportionality, where there has to be the least invasive mechanism that must be used by the state while it is infringing upon any of the fundamental right. Now, coming to the next important news that we have, it is about the Gujarat deluge that erases July's monsoon deficit that had been said by IMD. So right now, when it comes to the flooding, there are two of the states which are battling with the flood. That is, we have Assam as well as we have Gujarat, where flooding had happened because of the excessive rainfall. Now, over here, we have seen that ultimately, when it comes to the widespread deluge, so we can see that this was assisted by the Bay of Bengal trough or the low pressure system that have interacted with the western disturbance. And there had been heavy rainfall in the Gujarat that have wiped out the national rainfall deficit for the July. But at the same time, it is quite important to note over here that East and the Northeast India, they remain rainfall deficit 31.9%. And when it comes to the Southern Peninsula India, so it is 26.8% rainfall shortfall that you can see in this region, in the Southern India as well. Now, this is very important because ultimately you will find another news where the Andhra Pradesh government, it has issued an advisory where it has urged the farmers not to cultivate paddy during the Kharif season. Now, this is because there had been dangerously depleted reservoir levels which had been seen at the Sri Salem and the Nagarjuna Sagar dams, and there is the Pattisima lift irrigation which is being right now used to divert the Godavari water through the Polavaram main canal to the drinking water networks, and thereby this actually pertains to the rainfall deficit that we are seeing at the various places in the India. But at the same time, this also pertains to the heavy rainfall that is ongoing in Gujarat and Assam as well. Now, this is quite important because ultimately when it comes to the monsoon trough, we can see that it has displaced, and this displacement has caused the heavy rainfall in Gujarat. Ultimately, there is the extreme localized deluge in Gujarat, and there is also the shortfall that we can see in Andhra Pradesh and in Northeast as well. Although Assam is battling with the flood, but at the same time when it comes to the shortfall, so there had been shortfall, and also there had been depleted Krishna reservoir as well. And there had been a ban, or there had been the farmers which had been asked not to cultivate paddy, and this is again relates to the transfer or the water transfer between Godavari and Krishna river basin. Now, you can see over here when it comes to the Godavari river basin, it is where we have the surplus flow. Alright, we use the Pattisima lift irrigation canal where we have the Polavaram right main canal, and through this lift irrigation canal, the Godavari water, it is lifted towards, and it is then moved towards the Krishna river basin, where we have the deficit zone, we have the Sri Salem and the Nagarjuna Sagar which had been depleted, and this is where the water is being diverted for the drinking water priority and the paddy cultivation that had been paused in the region or in Andhra Pradesh. Again, quite important because we have already discussed about the deficient rainfall, about the El Nino, and that is where you can connect the complete dots to. Now, coming to the next important news that we have, it is a growth story that needs women at work. Now, again, quite important because this pertains to the female workforce participation ratio or the rate, where there had been a new economic study conducted by Mehrotra and Parida, which actually reveals that there is a percentage point increase in the India's female workforce participation rate, and if there is an increase in the female workforce participation, so ultimately that also adds to the percentage points to the annual GDP growth as well. Now, this is quite important because we talk about Viksit Bharat. We talk about 2047, where we actually want to see India as the developed country. But when it comes to the developed country, we need to see that the female workforce participation rate that also must increase. Because ultimately, when you will see India's workforce participation for the female, it remains below. That is comparable to the low participation regions in the West Asia, despite that there are the rapid gains in the secondary and the higher education enrollment parity among the women as well. Now, after 2020, we have seen that when it comes to the rural female workforce participation rate, that reflects that there had been the distress driven, the feminization of the agriculture, where we have the increase in the unpaid family labor that we have seen, rather than that there had been the structured non-farm employment expansion in the rural regions as well. Now, this relates to one of the important theory, or you can say one of the important concept that was given by Claudia Goldin. And this is where we are talking about the U-shaped female labor supply curve. Now, over here, Claudia Goldin, she says that when it comes to the women, so in the case of women, when it comes to the agriculture or the industry, there is actually the workforce participation, it moves down. When there is the education and the education is provided to the women, so ultimately the first step is that there is not a drastic increase in the female workforce participation. There is actually a dip in the workforce participation rate of the female, and then it actually rises. All right, so this is the U-shaped or you can say the female labor supply curve that was given by Claudia, and again that is quite important. Now, this is very important because we have the rising female education, but then we do not have the formal non-farm jobs for the women as well. Or we can say that the female workforce participation is quite less when it comes to the non-farm jobs. Now, this is leading to the agrarian economic distress as well, and there is the rise in the unpaid family labor when it comes to the women participation. Now, there is a policy intervention that is required, and we have the Tamil Nadu model where actually in the garments and the electronics, we have lots of women which are basically employed. So when it comes to the complete, the perspective, you will see that Tamil Nadu, it employs nearly about more than 40% of India's, female factory workers. And this is because we have the textile clusters, we have the electronic clusters which are located in Tripur and Coimbatore. There is also the hostel infrastructure, there is mobility that is there, and that is the major reason why we have more female workforce participation in Tamil Nadu. All right, but at the same time, when it comes to the north of India, so in the north of India, you will see that the female workforce participation is quite low. Like for example, in Bihar, it is just 15%, and therefore there has to be the state intervention that must be done for increasing the female workforce participation rate. Now, this is quite important because ultimately you will see that there is a regional disparity where the Tamil Nadu, it accounts for only nearly about 5 to 6% of India's population. But at the same time, it absorbs more than 40% of India's female factory workers, where the drivers are that there are secure hostels, there is transport and the garment hubs, there is the electronic hubs as well. But when it comes to Bihar, the northern belt, there is only 15% of the female workforce participation rate, where actually you will see that there is high care burden, the lack of the labor intensive hubs which had been established, and that is one of the reasons that we do not have much of the female workforce participation in the case of Bihar or the North Indian states. Now, coming to the next important news that we have is India's foreign policy. It must look seaward. So this is basically about the global maritime security and the diaspora protection as well, which pertains to your GS paper 2 and GS paper 3 as well. Now, this is quite important because you will find in today's The Hindu that there is an Indian seafarer who had been killed in a missile attack on the commercial vessel MV Omorfi that was there in the Black Sea. There had been also earlier incidents where we have lost 4 of the Indians. They have died off the Ukrainian coast, and also multiple seafarers, they actually right now, they remain stranded in the West Asian maritime zones. Now, when it comes to the Ministry of External Affairs, it has condemned the targeting of the commercial shipping and also affirmed that the freedom of navigation faces right now the severe security risks which are there. Also, when it comes to India, please remember that when it comes to India, so India is supplying over 12% of the global seafarer workforce, where we have 3.2 lakh seafarers, and actually we rank second worldwide in terms of the seafarers behind the Philippines. Now, DGS, or the Director General of the Shipping, it has prohibited the recruitment agencies from placing the Indian seafarers on 366 standard or substandard or the abandoned vehicles or the vessels that had been also in the news. So now this is quite important because ultimately when it comes to the safety of the seafarers, there are the issues. Now the issue is basically about the jurisdiction or the complexity that is there, because ultimately you will see over here that when it comes to the merchant navy, all right, so in the merchant navy you will find that there is an Indian, and that Indian is basically recruited in Mumbai. Now after being recruited in Mumbai, he is being employed by a Singapore firm, and at the same time that Singapore firm is basically asking him to sail on a Panama flagged vessel. So ultimately this is here where we have the different responsibilities or differences of the jurisdiction that actually emerge, because this person is Indian who had been employed by the Singapore firm, and also right now he is on the Panama flagged vessel, which is basically moving towards or moving into the international waters. So this is where we have the complexity that we are talking about. Now there is a flag state responsibility that is as per UNCLOS. So UNCLOS says that the state under whose flag the ship sails holds the primary, regulatory and the legal jurisdiction over the vessel safety and the crew rights as well. But at the same time, there is MLC, that is the Maritime Labour Convention, that was stuck in, or it was adopted in 2006, which is ILO convention, which sets the comprehensive global standards for the seafarer employment and their repatriation, health and the social protection as well. So here this is quite important, that there is the domestic labour protection, we have the labour codes, and there is the MLC or the Maritime Labour Codes or the protection that we are talking about that was stuck in 2006. Now how these two are different is because when it comes to jurisdiction sovereignty, so according to the domestic labour provision, there is direct territorial enforcement by the Indian labour codes. But at the same time, when it comes to the MLC, there is the fragmented responsibility, or you can say the fragmented sovereignty, that is across the flag state, across the port state and the recruitment country as well. Now when it comes to the amendment recourse, so in the domestic labour protection, we have the clear recovery of wages under the domestic insolvency laws. But at the same time, when it comes to the maritime labour protections, so there is a complex international dispute resolution that relies on the flag state enforcement as well, because it is the primary responsibility of the flag state. Also, when it comes to the regulated or the contract transparency, so there is a regulation under the standard employment contract laws, but here in the maritime labour conventions, so there is a subjection, or it is subject to the opaque ownership structures of the international ship owners. Also, when it comes to the war zone safety, so here you can see that in the domestic labour protection, they are protected under the national industrial safety laws. But when it comes to the maritime labour, so they are the protection is opaque. There is the high risk region designations and also the limited right to refuse the sailing as well. And that is why you can see when it comes to the seafarer safety, that is quite complex, because we have the three of the jurisdiction where it actually overlaps, and this is where it becomes too complex to look after the safety of the seafarers in the hostile regions. Now coming to the next important news that we have is 10% of the US tariff that had been imposed. Now over here, when it comes to the US section 301, there are the tariffs that can be imposed by the USTR, and over here the US have announced that there will be permanent tariffs on the 60 trading partners that will be there, that will result from its section 301 investigation into the forced labor in global supply chains. Now India's tariff rate, it was kept at 10%. Now, instead of the proposed 12.5%, because ultimately India have proactively notified banning of the import of goods produced using the forced labor under the FTP or foreign trade policy that we have discussed earlier. And that is the reason that India had been imposed with 10% of the tariff, but we have the competing exporting nations, like for example we have China, we have Vietnam, Thailand, UAE and Brazil. They had been imposed with a higher tariff of 12.5%, and that will give, there are the two things. The first thing is that the Indian, exports, they will get, costly. They will get costly because obviously there is a 10% of the tariff that had been imposed. But at the same time, when it comes to the various countries to which we are, competing, like we have China, Vietnam, Thailand, UAE or the Brazil, So over here, the auto components or even the industrial goods, they will have a competitive advantage. So over here, you can see that ultimately when it comes to the complete perspective, there is a silver line, but at the same time, the exports, they will become costly. Also, the Indian textile and the gem and jewelry sector, they will face the margin pressure when it comes to the increasing of the cost in the US regime. Now coming to the next important news that we have, it is that can Election Commission do whatever it wants, and that is High Court on deputing the teachers for the SIR in Delhi. Now this is quite important because Delhi High Court, it has questioned the Election Commission of India regarding the large-scale mandatory deployment of the government school teachers as BLOs or the booth level officers for the SIR process. Also, High Court have observed that there is mandatory deployment that compromises the students' right to education and have questioned if the ECI or the Election Commission of India can override the basic educational duties which are under the shades of the Article 324. Now, this is basically after there had been a fatal heart attack of the 51-year-old municipal school teacher, which have faced the double duty stress, prompting that there must be demand to cap the deployment at during the non-teaching hours for the school teachers as well in the duties. Now, this is where we have two of the articles. We have Article 326 or 324, which actually grants the Election Commission of India the full autonomy, or you can say authority, for the superintendent's direction and control of the electoral rolls and the conduct of the election. Then there is Section 27 of the RTE Act 2009 as well, which actually prohibits the deployment of the teachers for the non-educational purpose, but there is the exception. The exception is for the decennial census. The exception is for the disaster relief and the duties which actually relates to the elections of the local bodies, the state government and also the parliament as well. So these are the exceptions where the school teachers, they could be deployed for the works which are or which do not relate to their education purposes. Now we have another news that is like children, the elderly too need the state-led care mechanism, and that had been said by the Karnataka High Court. Now over here this is quite important because ultimately here this relates to the juvenile justice that we talk about and also about the Maintenance and the Welfare Act 2007. So here the Karnataka High Court have said that there must be a parallel there where we have the elderly they must be also treated just like the juveniles, and they must be provided with a proper justice. So over here when it comes to the philosophical basis, so Maintenance and the Welfare Act of 2007 is an obligation based act where the reliance is on the family resources, but the proposed juvenile justice style model, so over here there is the right based model where the state will act as the parent of the last resort. Also, when it comes to enforcement, we have the civil litigation style tribunals which are there majorly basically the civil courts. They hear the the petitions which are filed under the Maintenance and the Welfare Act. Also, in this proposed amendment, there could be the institutional care, the emergency rescue and the social integration that can be done by the state, just like we see in the US and in the developed countries where the elderlies, they are taken care of by the state as well. Also, there is the active intervention where we have no active or the state funded rescue mechanism which are there in the 2007 Act. But in the case of if this proposed amendment is done or the proposed law is made, so there will be 24-hour helplines and the rapid response teams that will be there for the elderly. And in the case of medical support, there is conditional geriatric beds in the government hospitals. But in the proposed juvenile justice styled amendment or the model, there could be continuous state-funded medical rehabilitation for the elderlies as well. And also when it comes to the auditing and monitoring, there is minimal oversight of the private home environments. But in case of this proposed amendment, there could be dedicated social auditing and the institutional monitoring as well for the welfare welfare and the care of the elderlies. Now there is another news that is about the dengue vaccine that had been passed by the center, or it has been approved by the CDSO, and here we are talking about the Dengue. Now, this is quite important because we have the dengue vaccine, which is by Sanofi Pasteur, and we have Takeda GmbH that is actually manufactured the new vaccine that had been proposed by the CDSO, that is Qdenga, where actually the technology that had been used in dengue vaccine is chimeric yellow fever backbone. But in Qdenga, it is the recombinant dengue virus type 2 backbone that was taken for preparation of this vaccine. Now, when it comes to pre-vaccination screening, there is mandatory screening and it is highly dangerous for the dengue naive for the vaccine. But when it comes to the Qdenga, it is not required that there should be any kind of the pre-vaccination screening, and this is safe for both the seropositive and the naive type of the vectors as well, or the people. And that is why this has been when it comes to the complete vaccination, this has been prescribed for right from the 2 years to 60 years of age. And ultimately, when it comes to target age, so strictly the dengue vaccine is it for 9 to 45 years of age, and here when it comes to the Qdenga, that can be administered for the people who are between 4 to 60 years of age. Now, here when it comes to the dosage, so there are the 3 of the doses which are spaced 6 months apart for dengue vaccine, but when it comes to Qdenga, so there are the 2 doses which are spaced just 3 months apart, and the efficacy is that there is uneven across various serotypes, but when it comes to the Qdenga, so the efficacy is highest against the Dengue 2 or also lower against the Dengue 3 and Dengue 4 as well. So we have 2 different types of vaccinations. We have dengue vaccine and Qdenga, but at the same time, when it comes to Qdenga, that had been recently approved by the center or the CDSO in India. Now, coming to the next one that we have, it is this is about the UCC, and we have seen that there had been various proposals or the various UCCs which are right now in the pipeline, whether it is in Madhya Pradesh, whether it is there in Chhattisgarh, and there are in Maharashtra as well, where the committee had been formed. So over here, this is quite important, that what is the need for the UCC and why we have to move forward for the UCC as well. Now, over here, there are certain issues that are there in the various civil laws or various laws which are there, or the customary practices which are followed, and the issues that I am talking about, which these UCCs, they try to inculcate or they try to include into its perspective, is that there is the issue of polygamy. Now, when it comes to the traditional framework, the polygamy had been permitted under the specific religious personal laws, like for example in the Muslim law, but at the same time the proposed state level UCC, it will explicitly ban for the all citizens under the standard code. So polygamy is the one of the issue that has been targeted by the Uniform Civil Code. Then there is live-in relationships as well, which is right now unregulated. There is limited protection under the domestic violence law, and that has also been provided by only the Supreme Court. So there are, as per the UCC, there will be mandatory registration. Non-compliance will invite the penalties, and thereby it will regulate the live-in relationships as well. Then there is the tribal customary laws as well, which had been overridden if there is any journal civil statute that will apply. But at the same time, when it comes to the UCCs, they have excluded the various tribal customary laws, and ultimately that is to protect the Schedule 5th and the Schedule 6th autonomy as well. Now, the succession and the inheritance has been another issue that had been tackled by the UCCs or the various proposed UCCs that we have seen. All right. And in the case of succession and inheritance, so right now there is the opaque mechanism that is there. And this actually varies heavily by religion and the gender also. But when it comes to the UCC framework or the Uniform Civil Code, there will be standardization, there will be equal shares that will be guaranteed for the male and the female heirs. And then the divorce and the alimony is again, it is opaque judicial or non-judicial process in the terms of the traditional framework. But when it comes to the UCC, it will standardize the judicial mechanisms, and it will be required for all types of the separations that will be there. And that is why we have various of the states which are moving towards the UCC framework that we are talking about. All right. So these are the important news that you can see in terms of your the Hindu today. And these are the questions that we can practice now. The first one is, with reference to the Public Examinations Prevention of Unfair Means Act 2024, consider the following statements. First, the offences are under the Act are cognizable, non-bailable and non-compoundable. Second, the Act applies exclusively to examinations conducted by UPSC and SSC. Third, organized examination syndicates under the Act can face imprisonment up to 10 years or fine up to 1 crore. So what will be the right answer here? No, it applies to UPSC and SSC as well. Alright. So it applies exclusively to the examination conducted by UPSC, SSC and all the examinations which are conducted. So second is not incorrect. Alright. It applies exclusively to the examinations which are conducted by UPSC, but yes, exclusively. So that is one of the term that can, exclusively means that only for these. So no, not just exclusively, but it also applies to all the examinations which are conducted all over India, and therefore the answer will be yes. It will be 1 and 3 only, because over here the statement 2 is where we have the exclusively that actually gets it incorrect. The second question that we have over here is consider following statements regarding delimitation in India. First, the orders of the Delimitation Commission have the force of law and cannot be called into question before any court. Then, Article 82 of the Constitution mandates the readjustment of the allocation of seats after every decennial census. And the constitutional amendment froze the total number of Lok Sabha seats based on 1971 census until the first census taken after 2026. So, which of the statement given above are correct? Alright, the Constitutional Amendment 84th. The 84th Constitutional Amendment froze the total number of Lok Sabha seats based on the 1971 census until the first census taken after 2026. So we have the Constitutional Amendment. The first amendment was made by 42nd, but then it was only up to 2000. Alright, and then the delimitation or the freeze, it was extended by 84th Amendment Act later on. Alright. Now coming to the next question that we have, it is which of the following best describes the principles of the proportionality test affirmed in K.S. Puttaswamy 2017 judgment regarding the state surveillance. First, state intrusion into the privacy is permissible whenever executive discretion deems it necessary for the public order. Second, any restriction on privacy must be or must have legitimate state goal, statutory backing, suitability and represent the least restrictive measure. Then privacy rights are absolute during peaceful public protest and cannot be restricted under any circumstances, or the digital data or personal data can be collected freely in public spaces without statutory authorization if used for the AI training. So what will be the right answer? So it is about the proportionality test that we talk about. Yes, the right answer is that any restriction that is there on the privacy, it must have a legitimate state goal, statutory backing, suitability and represent the least restrictive measure, and that is the correct answer. We have the B, that is the right answer. Then coming to the next question, we have with reference to the Indian Southwest monsoon and hydrological management, consider the following statement. First, the Pattisima lift irrigation scheme lifts the surplus water of the Krishna river to the deficit basin of the Godavari river. Then, a southward shift of the monsoon trough from its normal position generally leads to excess rainfall in central India and deficient rainfall in the northeast India. Then, micro irrigation adoption under the per dropped more crop scheme is implemented by the Ministry of Jal Shakti. So, what will be the correct answer here? What will be the right answer? Yes, the correct answer is when it comes to Ministry of Jal Shakti, actually when it comes to per drop more crop, this is under Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. All right, this is under the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. That is basically, it is not under the Jal Shakti department. All right. So the third is incorrect. We have first, that is again correct, because when it comes to the Krishna river, that is deficit, not the Godavari river. Godavari river basin is surplus from where? Through the Pattisima micro or the lift irrigation. The water is irrigated or lifted towards the Krishna river. So answer will be A. That will be the correct answer. Yes, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. Right. Now coming to the next question, consider the following statements regarding female workforce participation in India. First, the female workforce participation rate in India is higher than the global average. Then second, a high proportion of rural female work participation post 2020 is accounted by or for by the unpaid family labor. Then Claudia Golden's research shows a U-shaped relationship between female labor force participation and the economic development. So, which of the statement given above are true? Right. So, let's see what will be the right answer. Right, we have 2 and 3, that is correct, but the first one is incorrect. We do not have the female workforce participation that is higher than the global average. Now coming to the next question, that is over here. This is where you will write the answer in the comments. All right, you will comment down your answer and I will see if you will be able to write the answer correctly. With reference to the International Maritime Law and Seafarers Protection, consider the following statements. The first one is, under UNCLOS, the flag state has primary jurisdiction over the internal administrative and the labor matters on a commercial ship. Then, the Maritime Labour Convention MLC 2006 was adopted under the auspices of the International Maritime Organization. And the Directorate General of Shipping operates under the Ministry of External Affairs. So, which will be the right answer? Just comment down your answer in the comment after the session. All right. So, over here we have the question for your mains practice as well. This is for your GS paper 2. That is the penal legislative measures like the public examinations, Prevention of Unfair Means Act 2024 are necessary but insufficient to eradicate the systemic malpractices in public recruitment. Critically examine the structural, the institutional and technological reforms needed in examinations bodies like the NTA or the National Testing Agency to restore the public trust. And then we have the second question as well, that is the post-2020 increase in the India's female workforce participation rate, FWPR, is driven more by agrarian economic distress than the formal employment creation. Analyze the structural bottlenecks hindering female workforce participation in India and suggest actionable policy interventions drawing from successful regional models. So these are one of the or two of the questions that you can practice. And once again, before ending the session, let me tell you that we have the GS Foundation badge. That is Resolution P2I badge, where actually we guide you right from the NCERT foundations towards the advanced stages. So these badge or this complete badge, they are based upon the SMART model, where you get the structured classes, where you get the mentorship, where you get the assessment dashboard, even the revision and the test series as well. Now we have the evening batch that is starting for the English, that will be there from 27th of July, and you can enroll into the batch by using the code BRS Live, and that will fetch you the maximum discount onto the platform. We also have the public administration optional batch, where I take the classes where we do not actually take the classes in the bookish language. We actually have modeled the complete of the course into a kind of the regime where actually I teach you the public administration from the UPSC perspective. So you can also enroll into the public administration batch. Again, you can use the same code, that is BRS Live, that will fetch you the maximum discount. So that would be all in today's session. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me over here on the platform of StudyIQ. I will see you in the next. That is on Monday. See you soon, Apex and Shinobi as well, and the others have joined me onto the platform. And ultimately, do not forget to like the session, also share the session with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss any of the important updates. So that would be all. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care and Jai Hind. Thank you.